On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario, south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here and are proud to call it our own. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road, you're bound to be back for more. Of Norfolk, Norfolk, my southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. With hard work we built a dream that only will.
Councillor Vanden Driesch, can you hear us now?
I can now, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, good morning, everyone. I now call Norfolk County's budget meeting to order. I'd like to remind everyone that our meetings are web streamed and televised, and would ask you to ensure your phones are on silent. If you are attending virtually, please mute yourself when not speaking and use the Microsoft Teams raise hand feature icon to be called upon, and remove it after you finish speaking. We're going to go into approval of the agenda and changes to the agenda. So the agenda has been amended, which was shared with us yesterday. We have the addition of 3.1, a deputation, Judy Schaefer, regarding the museum staffing. We've moved item 4.1 to communication items as 5.3. Item 4.3 has been updated to include the staff report CS 23023 and will be addressed directly before the communication section towards the end of the meeting. The addition of the item 4.4, staff report 23011, proposed 2023 levy supported operating budget. This report was included in the budget binders. The addition of 4.4.1 and 4.4.2, presentations regarding proposed 2023 levy divisional presentations that supported operating budget. So just as a reminder, that's that big package that was on our desks yesterday. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder to approve the new agenda. Moved by Councillor Columbus, seconded by Councillor Huffman. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I myself will be declaring a, is that what you were going to say? I myself will be declaring a pecuniary interest regarding the Police Service Board budget, so I will pass the chair to Councillor Micheli, but as per the procedural bylaw that we've passed, I am going to stay in the room. We'll pass that separately. I'd like to bring the Budget Committee's attention to Communications Item 5.1. which is the budget meeting timetable. This timetable outlines the order in which we're anticipating to proceed through today's meeting. It provides estimated times that the items will be discussed, and the items highlighted in yellow on the timetable are required to proceed at the timelines provided. However, other items on the timetable are estimates and provided to just help guide the meeting procedure. So we'll try to stick to that schedule today as best as possible. And if there aren't any comments or questions from Budget Committee, we're going to move into deputations. So first up, we have Judy Schaefer regarding museum staffing. So Judy, you can join us at the podium here. Just go ahead and turn that microphone on whenever you're ready. You do have 5 minutes to speak today.
Good morning, Mayor Martin and councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to appear here before you today. My name is Judy Schaefer, and I'm a retired elementary school teacher. I'm an avid supporter of all museums, and I would like to now acknowledge our beautiful Norfolk museums and the excellent and dedicated curatorial staff. I'm here representing myself, my community, and the Multicultural and Heritage Association of Norfolk as its vice president. The purpose of this deputation is to address staffing at the museums and the need for fair and equal curatorial staffing across all Norfolk museums. Specifically, we are asking that a full-time curator ranging from Long Point through to Simcoe. In addition, I have with me letters of support from Bobby Ann Brady, MPP, the Delhi Chamber of Commerce, the Delhi BIA, the Port Rowan South Walsingham Heritage Association, and a learn from concerned educators. These are found further back in the packages we received. Prior to COVID, the Delhi Tobacco Museum and Heritage Center was staffed by both a full-time curator and an assistant curator. We look to this time as status quo, as COVID was an irregular factor. The actions of previous council significantly reduced the staffing across the Norfolk museums. We were told that all museums would be closed equally and would see an equal service level reduction across Norfolk. This is not what has transpired and has put programming at the Delhi Museum at a serious disadvantage. Removing the full-time curator and assistant curator from the Delhi Museum has caused inconsistent and a huge reduction of hours. There's no new programming, extremely limited access to public heritage and culture, as well as access to the identity of the community. The west end of the county feels it's lost its representation in this sense. In December of 2021, the Delhi Museum was only open on Mondays, which compared with several days a week at the Waterford Heritage and Agricultural Museum and the Harbour Museum in Port Dover, as well as the Norfolk Archives at the former Eva Brick Donnelly Museum in Simcoe, all of which also had dedicated curatorial staff. I would like to refer you to the article in the Simcoe Reformer, December 22nd, 2021, which is the first page included in your package. In the words of Councillor Columbus, Delhi seems to have been forgotten, and we echo this. The archives appears to have supplanted the Delhi Museum as a county priority, despite the latter's long and rich history as a municipal facility. In this same article, Councillor Columbus cited the minutes of the September 15th, 2021 meeting of Norfolk Heritage and Culture Committee, where curators of the museum in Waterford and Port Dover, along with the curator of the archives, provided a year-end activity report. Noticeable in its absence was an update on the Delhi Museum. It seems that the Norfolk Archives is operating at the expense of the Delhi Museum. Councillor Columbus stated this, and he was especially concerned because the west end of Norfolk County had already made sacrifices in the area of heritage and culture as a means of helping the county cope with its precarious finances. In 2019, the Teterboro Pioneer Museum was closed as a cost-cutting measure. Councillor Columbus continued to state, heritage and cultural resources in Norfolk are concentrated in the east end of the municipality to the real detriment of the west. I wish to formally thank Councillor Columbus for his continued support then and now, and yet this matter remains unresolved. Our museum is inadequately staffed, and the sign on the door continually says, "Sorry, we are closed." We are often told that the Delhi Museum and Heritage Center does not warrant a full-time curator or an assistant curator, as there does not seem to be enough interest or volunteers. I can assure you both of these statements are untrue, and I would like to explain. In May of last year, Norfolk County held a community day, which I'm told this year will be a weeks-long event. Norfolk Heritage and Culture Committee, having reduced its curatorial staffing, was not able to plan for the Delhi Museum. And a curator reached out to the Multicultural and Heritage Association of Norfolk, of which I am vice president, and asked if we would take on the planning and implementation of the event. We did so with excitement and pride.
Judy, you have 1 minute remaining.
As an association, we planned an amazing day. 16 countries were represented. We were fortunate to have a newly immigrated Ukrainian join us. Members wore heritage costumes, and there were interactive activities, live music, live artists. In total, 367 adults and children, people from within the community and beyond, enjoyed the day. This day has sparked renewed enthusiasm for school visits to the museum, which were unfortunately unavailable. The Multicultural and Heritage Association has now set up full-day displays at St. Francis Cabrini, Delhi Public School, and is scheduled in April of 2023 at Bloomsburg. And we are in communication with this regard with St. Joseph's. As you can see, there's interest. Volunteers are available. These volunteers are ready to assist the Multicultural and Heritage School programming and tours at the museum, as they always have in the past. But without adequate museum staffing, this will not be realized. Updated lists of members who are willing to volunteer have been provided to the museum.
So sorry, Judy. Just to be equitable, I'm going to have to cut you off there, but I think Councillor Columbus has a question for you right out of the gate.
Actually, yes. Is there a chance that we can let this deputation finish?
That sounds great to me.
Thank you very much.
Moved by Councillor Van Passen, seconded by moved by Councillor Columbus, seconded by Councillor Van Passen. All in favor? Carry.
I would further make note of the opportunities in June for the museum, for teachers who book their year-end trips at the museum. We were encouraged to hear that a curator was hired late in June. I would like to thank those individuals who were instrumental in bringing the Soil Superheroes exhibit to our museum, and for the contractual hiring of Andrew Moore, the assistant curator, who was assigned to the museum from June to mid-December. Excitedly, I called schools and teachers to tell them about this opportunity. During this time, October through December, I volunteered along with other members to help facilitate school tours. 652 people went through the museum during this time. Once word got around, the exhibit was fantastic, programming, curriculum, expectation-based. Many more tours would have been booked had the tours not been restricted to only Tuesday mornings. All other visits were considered only drop-in, and teachers were advised that they would not receive the whole experience. Delhi Public School and St. Francis booked the majority of the tours, while schools requiring busing were unable to justify the high cost of transportation for our drop-in. My question is why, when such an exhibit of high caliber was within our museum, why was it not staffed adequate? Such a missed opportunity, and very disappointing to the many students in the county. While both WAM and the Port Dover Museum state on their websites that they offer interactive curriculum-based education programs and guided tours for students during the school year, 4 days a week, my question here is why are the students in the west end of the county not afforded the same opportunities? The desire by educators does indeed exist, and I have included a letter from educators in your package. I would like to now refer to the museum sustainability study regarding the Norfolk museums. I have included the executive summary and key findings and conclusion page in your package. The key findings are as follows, and the two most applicable here are the number of museums supported by the county's population is indeed in line with that seen in other comparable municipalities of its size. This is very important to note, as it counters some perceptions encountered in the interview and surveys that the county was overinvested in this regard. The other key finding, the cost of the museum operations in Norfolk County is not excessive when compared to other single-tier municipalities. This is also very important to note, as it counters perception to the contrary encountered in the interviews. The first recommendation is one of an enhanced status quo. Again, I refer back to our understanding of status quo pre-COVID. After a review of several alternative configurations for the County of Norfolk, an enhanced status quo option was recommended, and the reasons for this are threefold. The community survey revealed that a very large majority of the population consulted, nearly 74% of 700 responses, desired this option and rejected further consolidation or centralization of its museums. Our review of the financial situation facing Norfolk showed that the county's support of museums was reasonable and in line, and a high-level review of costs showed that this was likely the least costly operation and option. The key findings and recommendations are significant, and the signed petitioners feel it supports the hiring of an additional full-time curator and assistant curator, specifically to hire and appoint these positions to adequately staff the Delhi Tobacco Museum and Heritage Center. Almost done. Our Tobacco Museum and Heritage Center is a source of great pride, a connection to our parents and grandparents, and a legacy for our children. Our museum promotes and encourages cultural and heritage awareness. It strives to help us accept, acknowledge, and appreciate the people who make up our community mosaic, as well as celebrate the contributions, both past and present. Visitors gain a richer appreciation and understanding of our community heritage. Community members and visitors can gather to learn, create, discuss, perform, and socialize. Delhi is realizing real growth in the form of many new developments and housing. Local businesses are opening and thriving, such as the Little Local, whose owner is new to our town and who now is the president of our BIA. We have welcomed a Ukrainian population searching for a new start. Over 2,000 people and businesses throughout the West End, and including Simcoe, have made their concerns clear. While in conversation and dialogue with these people regarding the petition, I did not find one who was not in favor. Businesses and farmers such as Ryder Farms have indicated a desire to engage in various ways to assist in recognizing alternative crops within the museum building. Education workers have a desire to access Ontario curriculum-based programming to support and enrich their student learning. Some have voiced their time. Some have voiced and are volunteering their time, if required, to create programming. I have reached out to businesses such as Ride the Vine, who are intrigued by the possible addition of a Delhi Museum stop during its tour. The museum is highly visible. It's accessible. It's an engaging space surrounded by beautiful parkland and trails, the Quants Dam, as well as 2 historical buildings. It is a desirable space. Rental opportunities are endless for gatherings, social events, utilizing both the indoor and outdoor space. For years, our museum has successfully hosted community development events and educational experiences. It has the capacity to broaden its representation, focusing not just on tobacco, but on lumber and alternative crops. There are many stories for it to tell, like the stories of immigration, manufacturing, First Nations. I realize that you may have many reasons to say no to the request of this deputation and petition, but I encourage you to consider the many positive reasons to say yes.
Thank you, Judy. Are there any questions from council to the deputation, committee to the deputation? Councillor Columbus.
Yes, thank you for that thorough deputation. But my question is, the volunteers, how would you expect more volunteers to be engaged in this facility?
Prior to COVID, when there was an advisory committee at the museum, it was, I think, attended and members were at a number of 12. We all were very actively engaged. And when there were events planned, we would pull our friends or acquaintances in to help us. Presently, when Andrew Moore was the curator there for that short period of time, I gave him updated lists. So there are about 8 dedicated volunteers who will help the museum proper, and about 22 multicultural and heritage association members who will help with that type of programming during school tours and programming.
Councillor Van Andrieschie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Judy, you did an amazing job. Thank you for that presentation. And I totally agree with you. I think it's a matter of equity, that we make sure that we at the West End could possibly see a fair share of the time that's allotted. But I'll go back in history a little bit. The actual museum was used for a lot of social events. There was a lot of dinners and hosting there, and it has that possibility again. I think it's important that we try to strive for any dollars that we can get out of it to be able to use towards the museum by renting out the facility, like you had mentioned, time to time. So I'm in total support of what we can do there, and I know many people volunteer and help out. So I do appreciate your presentation, and I fully support you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Huffman.
Thank you, Mayor Martin, through you to Judy. Thank you very much for your deputation. I just wanted to compliment you on debunking some of the myths regarding the museum service level and funding that was part of the narrative to our prior CAO, prior to our current CAO. That was something that I always struggled with and I felt wasn't just. Thank you.
Fully agree, Councillor Huffman. Big narrative about the ratio of services that we provide and how many and so on. So thank you for bringing that up in the sustainability plan. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just through you, Judy, thanks for your presentation. But more so than that, I just want to take a moment to commend you for the work that you've done and really to say thank you. It's people like you and volunteers like you that give of their time. It's clearly a labor of love and a passion. And you are what keeps our community running. So I just really want to acknowledge that and say thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Michelle, then Barry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Judy, thank you very much for your presentation today. Very informative, I think, for everyone. I do agree that this is a resource that is underutilized, and it is a bit of a shame that we don't have more opportunities for people in the West End to enjoy that museum, and of course the rest of Norfolk County and all of the people from outside Norfolk County who previously did make good use of that museum site. And in light of that, as you probably know, we are putting money into upgrades at the museum. There's a new HVAC system being installed there, improvements to the washrooms for accessibility, those types of items. So it would be a shame to have that museum closed on such a regular basis. Thank you again for your presentation.
Councillor Barry, and I'm just going to remind everyone for asking questions. Go ahead, because everyone else has made statements, but in general.
To push or not to push?
No. So again, I'm going to echo some of it, I guess. I do support in principle the request. I think arts and culture and heritage is extremely important to community development, also to the economy and all these things. I guess it's more of a comment, but kind of a question is, as you are pursuing sustainability and your fund development. I just, how do I say this? Can we expect that the museum will do programming and events and things that are unique to that and not duplicating programs and fundraisers and other things that are already available in the community? Is that something that we can reasonably expect to see? New programming, unique programming?
I absolutely can say yes. All our programming is unique in the sense that it represents our culture and heritage in that area. It also, have been so many events unique, like the Ladies' Night Out, our Thanksgiving dinners, our live artists who create art based on the community and the heritage.
So what I'm hearing is you're feeling a much needed gap, and it's completely a distinct.
It is distinct in the sense that although WAM is an agricultural museum as well, it doesn't represent many of the things that are in our West End.
Final call on questions. I have a couple of questions for staff. I might pose them to staff when we get you to step away, Judy. Then we are going to talk about an additional resource that Councillor Columbus has requested us to discuss at budget. I guess if I could jump on the comment bandwagon, I too would like to thank you for challenging the narrative. I think that's really helpful information for us to see and have in print, and definitely talk to Brandon about that further. I thank you for bringing the conversation up. It's kind of a cheesy political thing to say, but I didn't ever support the cut when it happened at budget. It was very difficult decision at that time. And now I want to just be fully transparent with you. I wish that we could give resources and money to all ends of the county for all these great initiatives. Now my personal struggle is that we've had staff sit down at budget and look through all of the wants and the needs of the corporation through that corporate lens. And although that vacancy is certainly there from a curator perspective to offer more programming, it wasn't recognized as a corporate priority at this time for Norfolk County. And so I'm juggling adding these services back in, and because everything you've said is wonderful and I completely agree, but also juggling the corporate lens and what we need, what staff have identified going forward as the best use and the best fit for extra dollars. But that being said, regardless of what happens, I want to make a commitment here to you today that I will work with Councillor Columbus and our staff and look at equitably getting the doors open on all of our facilities equally as best as we can, with or without that staffing complement, because you're absolutely right. That commitment was made to to former council and to the public when we made that termination in that position, that there would be equitable services amongst all of our communities, and we have not saw that to date. So thank you for bringing all this information forward. I really, really appreciate it, and thank you for advocating for the arts and culture and community needs as a whole. Councillor Columbus?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When we dealt with this 4 years ago, when the cut was made to a lot of other budgets also, we did not have the benefit of the sustainability study that has only come on stream in the last couple of years. I think that has certainly changed things, because at one time there was thought that these museums, there was more money expended in Norfolk than in other jurisdictions, other municipalities. So, and we do subsidize arenas. And some people go to arenas, some people go to museums, some people go to other, so have their heart in those areas. The other thing I just wanted to say, I was just reading our motto up there: history, heritage, and diversity. And I think the Delhi Museum covers all those bases that are in our motto. Thank you.
Great points. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Van Passen, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since we're still asking questions of deputations, I will throw the rather blunt one out there. If you look at our heritage culture budget, we're looking at close to 1.2 million of levy dollars. Probably throw in 300,000 to 500,000 a year for capital for maintaining those buildings. And I don't think we've ever pumped 10,000 people through our museum system in a year, but even if you divide the total cost by 10,000. That's about $150 per visit. Everything we do for those kind of things, the public property arenas, they all cost money. It's trying to balance that acceptable level of loss. What in your mind is the acceptable level of loss? And very quickly, if we increase the number of people, that reduces the cost per person. So is a number of that sort of size an acceptable level of loss to the taxpayer as a whole, or are there better ways to reduce that?
Well, I think in my deputation, I mentioned the great desire of schools for programming and tours. You could easily raise the admission from $5 to even $8. People want to be able to use the facilities in their own communities. There have been so many people who have called the museum wanting to book it for various activities and events. I know of a bus tour that stops there when European visitors are through. There are just so many ways that we can prioritize on the wonderful building, on the programming. Even if the classrooms of just St. Francis and Delhi Public School went through twice a year, which I think they would if programming, Ontario-based curriculum programming was established as it is in the Port Dover Museum. Many students would be going through. There's opportunity there then to create activities where it requires a back visit, a further visit to pick up, to have a demonstration, parents, grandparents. The opportunities are endless. And I would like to then also say the businesses, every business I spoke to, small, big, Titan Trailers, Riders Farm, Skylar Cherry Farm, they all are ready and willing to support the museum financially, but they do not want to take on the expenditure of a county employee. So once the curator is there, it opens the doors and allows us to do so many other things. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Oh, may I just add that Councillor Columbus does have further information in his package, and the signed petition is with him.
Great, we'll get
Thank
him
you.
to share that with us on a break before we get into discussion on your, or you want to pass it around now? We're going to revisit the discussion of this addition to the budget once we get into that section of the budget a little bit later. So just hold on to it. Maybe we'll make sure everyone sees it. Okay, I'm looking to receive the deputation as information. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Duffy, seconded by Councillor Berry. All in favor? Carried. I myself was going to ask a question of staff, but instead I just fired it off in an email, and maybe we can get some information back before we discuss that at budget. Is there any other questions of staff at this point in time that you'd maybe like to get some information back to us later in the day concerning it? No? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, we're moving along. So today and tomorrow, we will be addressing the levy-supported new incremental capital and study projects in the 2023 to 2032 capital plan, the proposed 2023 levy-supported operating budget, and the proposed 2023 Haldeman Norfolk Health Unit operating budget on Thursday, which reminds me I was going to share with all of council that tomorrow at 9 a.m. we will start with the Board of Health, 9:30. Point of this at 9:30, we'll start with the Board of Health and then go into the budget afterwards, just so there's no confusion in your calendars. Take a look. 9:30 Board of Health budget tomorrow morning. 9:30. 9:30. We're striving to complete as much review as possible today related to the 2023-2032 capital plan and the 2023 levy supported operating budget. The proposed 2023 Haldeman Norfolk Health Unit operating budget will be completed tomorrow when Budget Committee is reconvened following the Board of Health meeting. The capital component is a continuation of the review we started on November 17th. Where the asset management portion of the capital plan was approved, we continue this review last week for the rate-supported new incremental capital and study projects. Today is the final step in the review of the capital plan. I'm not going to pass it over to you yet. Okay, I think we're going to go into the first section, which is 4.2. CS 23005, the levy supported new incremental and studies. And I'm going to pass it over to Kathy to start us off.
Thank you, Chair Martin, and good morning, members of council. As Chair Martin mentioned, council examined and approved the 2023 asset management capital projects proposed for Norfolk County.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, but I find it very confusing, all the addendums we've received, packages we've received. We spent a lot of time on the binder we received at the start. And every time I come here, I get a new addendum, orange copies, and I just asked that question a minute ago. You said 9:30. Well, these documents all say 9 o'clock.
That's why I mentioned it, 9:30 for tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Kathy?
Thank you. So as Chair Martin mentioned, council examined and approved the 2023 asset management capital projects proposed for Norfolk County, plus the 2024 to 2032 10-year capital plan back in November. In addition, project requests from boards and agencies were also entertained. Following the November review, council considered and approved the water and wastewater new and incremental capital projects and studies. Leaving you with the final task today to review the levy side of the house for new and incremental projects and new studies for the levy side. The logic behind splitting the review into various segments was to address the timing of the election and to also allow staff the flexibility to move quickly on 2023 capital projects in order to hopefully achieve more favorable pricing and construction times. Staff have initiated procurement steps for these projects. Just as a recap from last week, I mentioned new and incremental projects generally do not have any available funding sources and typically will have a direct financial impact on the need for additional annual contributions in order to replace these assets in the future, additional annual debt and interest payments, and potentially extra operating costs. These supplementary costs will need to be included in the 2024 and future levy supported budgets. Leaving you with these few comments, I'll pass it over to Rob, who will provide the details of the financial management and planning report included in your document. Thank you. Rob?
Good morning, Mayor and Council. The first report, as mentioned, the first report on today's agenda is CS 23005, which is for the levy supported new incremental capital and studies for the 2023 to 2032 capital plan. So as a result, once this is approved today, that will complete the capital budget review for 2023, and staff will be able to fully initiate any remaining projects within the capital plan. There are 4 main attachments associated with this report, which are included under the green package, the green cover package that you have today. Appendix 1 to that package, so the first document after the green cover, is a summary of the changes made to the capital plan from the November 17th meeting. The full capital plan is included electronically as your package is a full attachment to the report. Appendix 2 in that package is a summary of the levy funded capital projects for 2023. And then just to ensure that we have council has all the information required to make a full discussion and consideration of the projects within the plan, Appendix 3 includes new business sheets for all the capital projects. The final appendix is Appendix 4, which included as a blue cover sheet within your green package. This is a listing of all the projects that are up for approval today. So you'll note that in there are 1.4 million in new and incremental capital, which is funded primarily from the levy in the amount of 0.9 million. There are also 0.9 million in studies, which are to be funded from a mix of reserves as well as levy. And there's also 0.7 million asset management projects that are before you as well today to be reconfirmed by council. as some of these projects, all these projects are funded at least in part directly from the levy. It's a total funding of 0.5 million from the levy. So as council will note, the information that is contained within the appendix is primarily reflected in two main recommendations of the report for the new and incremental capital to be approved, as well as the levy funded components of the asset management projects. The final resolution to be approved by council will need to be adjusted slightly to reflect the resolution made at the December 5th budget committee, which was approved by council and which sought to brought forward the Waterford secondary plan, the amount of $90,000 from 2024 into 2023. As such, the dollar figure referenced in the second recommendation will need to be adjusted from the 2,258 million to 2,348,000. Table 1 in the report will also need to have will also have the levy funded study number of 527,000 increased by 500,000 to 577,000. And finally, the table 2 will also have an increase of $50,000, which will marginally increase the overall levy percentage to 3.5%. That concludes kind of my opening remarks for this report. And staff are available to answer any questions should council have any. Thanks.
Rob, can you repeat those additions, those increases, please?
Certainly. So the Waterford plan total budget is $90,000, which was currently contained in 2024. So with the resolution from the December 5th meeting, it was brought into 2023. So with that, the second recommendation of the report references 2,258,000, which will need to be increased to 2,348,000. Table 1 within the report, the levy funded studies number of 525,000 will need to increase to 577,000. And table 2, which is under the financial commentary section of the report, will need to increase by additional $50,000 as well, which will increase the overall levy impact of capital 3.47% to 3.5%.
Check my notes here. So as staff mentioned during the introduction of the report, committee will only be reviewing for approval the remaining new incremental capital and study projects that are levy supported as outlined from item 4.2, levy supported new incremental capitals and studies. Further details have been provided in the appendices 2 and 3 of the report. We will start with the summary on page A, which is 447 of your package with the green cover. The summary reference page numbers where business cases are located in appendix 3 for the new incremental projects. So we'll start with questions in your green package, turn it over to committee, questions to staff.
Could I get the page number repeated?
A 4 to 47 of your package with the green cover, and it's that thick cardstock paper, Councillor Van Andruschi.
So I'm looking at are we going to go through each of these in order, or are we just jumping around whenever we have questions? Okay, thank you.
I can kickstart while everybody's flipping through their pages. I've got a question about the online parking platform and the parking study, and just looking for kind of a status update on all of that.
Through the mayor to council, maybe I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Bill Cridlin, who can share a portion of it. So the parking pilot project, We do have a report ready to go, but we do have public consultation going through January. So based on the public consultation, we've decided to bump the report to February so we can compile all of that data into that finalized report. So that will come forward to council in February on the results of how the pilot project went and the feedback we've gotten. So you will see that in February. The comprehensive parking study is currently underway with operations, and I'll pass that over to Bill to provide an update on that.
Thank you, Teresa. Through Madam Chair. We started just before Christmas, met the successful consultants and have had 2 or maybe 3 meetings, larger meetings to get the study underway. There's also weekly meetings with our transportation person. So as of right now, the study is in its infancy, but we have met with the group and obviously there's all of the hot spots, let's say some special things in Turkey Point as far as alternate parking and perhaps roadside parking. We've got all the information to them and not a lot more to report than the studies out and going, and I believe it's going to be an April update to this council, just where the consultant is. So I'll double check that date, but I think we're going to aim for April. And there is actually an open house plan as well around the same time, so you'll see some very quick action on the study.
Okay, thank you, staff. And Teresa, is this a good opportunity to plug in to the public that we're still actively seeking out feedback online? I see that there's a lot of comments online, but I'm not sure that they're filling out the survey. Also, discuss that.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the online survey is available on our Engage Norfolk platform. It will be open till the end of January. So if individuals would still like to provide feedback, that is the best way to do so on this project at this time. Thank you.
Van Passen, then Barry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Get yourself in trouble. Last summer, we were presented with a warning from staff that we're looking at a 9% increase in tax levy just to keep up with inflation. Staff has done a lot of work and screened through a lot of things, and we have it down to like 5.5%, I think, number. Both of which are unacceptable. Our taxpayers have the same pressures on their finances. Now, we can go through here line by line. We can just delete anything that has the word new on it, get rid of it. If we've done without it so far, we can do without it for another year. That's how I live my life. If you didn't have the money, you didn't buy it. But you want to advance, the status of the county, the amenities that our people have. All of those things cost money. So I'm sort of in that dilemma. Do we want to go through 2 binders that are 2 inches thick each, line by line, and try to find $1,000 here and $10,000 there? And at the end of the day, you might get a 0.5 percentage point difference on this. Or do we give staff credit for all the work they've already done and, sort of take that concept that it is a bare bones budget? Which direction you want to play today, I guess is my question.
Thanks for that. I think that new council members deserve the option to go through and learn the budget. I think if we can find 0.5% we should find. And I do have some suggested amendments to the budget myself. But I also would agree with you and commend staff for an excellent budget. Go ahead.
That being the case, I think one of the items in this package right here is $15,000 for a new electronic sign at the rec center. I would put forth a motion that we cancel that.
Motion on the floor, proposed, is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Brunton. Any debate or discussion, Councillor Columbus?
Well, I'd like to learn more about this new electronic sign. More details about it.
Staff?
Sure, through the chair, and we'll see if perhaps Nikki is on the line that could help us out. I believe this would help with some electronic copy for the sign, so that we could have messages and programming and other things displayed on there. Just look to see if Nikki can help us out, unless Mr. Goodland and his staff are aware of it as well.
Through you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I will take a stab at this one. This project was something that was put in by the operations team. However, it has been something that's been in the capital budget for a number of years. The sign that we currently have is one of the big old yellow signs that require staff to go out and put in the little letters. We are completely limited to the amount of information that can be put on that sign. It's old, falling apart. Having the ability to have an electronic sign at the rec center would promote our programming so much more, including the multipurpose floor, which we are really hoping to get, increased usage on, as well as get our information out. The amount of people that are coming through the recreation center now with the seniors being there has increased greatly, and being able to put some advertising on a board of that nature would A, clean up the facility, but B, also get a lot of our good information out into the public.
If I may, Madam Mayor, I think part of the journey that we have here at Norfolk County is to increase our ability to communicate with our residents by transforming our signage at heavily used recreation centers, places where people gather. Having digital signs will allow us the ability to better promote programming that's happening when there's a public information session, information about different things, whether it's an upcoming holiday, service hours, whether it's an emergency, whether there's inclement weather coming, whatever that is. And part of the transformation of our communications plan is to really be able to promote and have different avenues to promote messaging to our residents. And digital signage is the first step in that journey for us to better communicate with our residents.
Councillor Barry, then Brendan.
I guess through the chair to Al, maybe. Would this be something that could fall under the communications department budget that we have already, though? Like, do they have a budget for expenses, and are we looking at this in a different way? If there's a value to our communications plan, the communications department can fall there.
Through you, Madam Mayor, this is for the capital cost of installing the sign. There isn't anything in the communications budget for capital that would cover this new cost. This is really a service improvement, and that's why it's in front of you here today.
Councillor Breton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Two options there. One, I'd like to know, we've had a sign at 3 and 24 that we had installed years ago. It's one of these signs that everything can put anything on. And the condition was that we, the town or the county at the time, could advertise on that sign. And I think that the people that use the rec center might read that sign, but if you want to encourage people outside the users, current users, you want to get that advertising someplace else besides just at the rec center. The other issue that I think is important is that if all the signs we have, we had a sign agreement with all the Addison signs throughout, say on Highway 3 and so forth. There was quite a bit of revenue that came in from them. I don't know where that revenue went, but if it's deemed to be appropriate, then we could use some of that revenue to put those sign or that sign at the rec center. And the last thing I would mention is I don't know what the status is of the old senior center, but if it's sold, let's take some of the money from the sale and put up a new sign at the rec center. Anyways, thank you.
Staff have any comments about sign revenue, for paying for sign revenue off the top of their head, or have to look into it? Okay, that's fine. Further debate with regards to this. There's a motion on the floor to remove it. So, sorry, Teresa, are we going to do proper motions here, or, okay.
Through the mayor to council. So the consensus comes for the levy part. This is still capital. So I think formal motions is fine unless we're going to go again through all of capital. Then I would go back to say we would do consensus.
Okay, so just to remind myself, it was moved by Councillor Van Passen, seconded by Councillor Breton, and Councillor Michelle would like to speak, and then I'm going to call the question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. one of the things that we discussed at our strategic priorities meeting was that we felt we needed to do more to educate and communicate with our residents. And I think that while I realize that perhaps this location might not be the most optimal for educating and communicating with everyone, I think a lot of people do drive by the rec center, and I think that if we want to, again, communicate more with our people, and the current sign is 20 years old, as the document indicates. I think that this kind of could be money well spent, and again, hopefully, as Councillor Brunton mentioned, if we can use that in some way to generate some revenue to offset this cost, I think frankly, it's money that would be well spent.
Thanks, Councillor Michelli. I agree with this investment. The fee is fairly nominal in the grand scheme of our budget. I was pleasantly surprised when I toured the rec facility recently at the amount of traffic, the seniors, the pool was full, the individuals are out walking around the court. We have the market there. We have fair uses, the curling club and so on. So I'm not concerned about its location. So I won't be supporting the motion to keep it in the budget. Other than that, I'm going to call the question. The motion is to remove this item from the budget. All those in favor? And opposed? Okay, it's not carried. It's not, so it's staying in the budget unless someone ends, but sure. Yep. Oh, you know what? I think actually I had Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have questions. I want to go back to the online parking platform that we were discussing before we went down the road of the sign there. So I see this is in the, so it's in the budget. So does that mean that the decision's been made to proceed with paid parking then? Okay. So we have the feedback that's coming from the public. I've heard from my community that the businesses who were supposed to be the main benefactors of this in Port Dover to turn over parking, they weren't consulted by staff or anything on how it went for them as business owners. We've talked about the public and individuals. And so my concern here is that we don't have all the information back and we haven't decided whether we're even continuing the paid parking, but by approving this, essentially we're saying we are we not saying we're going to go ahead with paid parking regardless of what the feedback is if we approve it?
Through the mayor to Council Barry. So the money that's in the budget, and Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, that is actually a carry forward from 2020. There was money in clerk's budget to deal with parking matters. And so in 2021, when I started with the county, we again created a parking group and we put together a plan to use that funding in different mechanisms. So we did the pilot parking project, we did the comprehensive parking study, we hired a temporary parking project manager, and we had carryover money to bring forward to 2023 to help manage the parking should we come up with another plan. So I would suggest that money is there because the county recognized that there were parking issues, and so it's there for us to use for different mechanisms. We don't know how we're using that right now. It's going to depend on what comes out of this study feedback, but I can turn it over to Kathy or Amy to confirm that. Through the chair, that's how I recall it.
Okay, so thank you. Again, through the chair, I guess back to Teresa. So it says, you mentioned you're not sure about how you can use it necessarily, but it does say here that it's an online paid parking platform within one or more of the lakefront communities. So given that we agree that we don't have the feedback part, or the community engagement part complete, we don't have a plan necessarily of how we're going to use this. I would guess I would move to strike the 95,000 from the budget until we've had that feedback and opportunity to see if we're even going to continue the program. And if we do decide to continue it, we can do this next year. If I'm not misunderstanding, but I don't see that we should approve this when we don't know if we're going to do the program. That's my motion to remove the 95.
So through the mayor, just to Councillor Barry, so that online parking title was actually put in 2020. So we, at that time, I wasn't with the county, but I'm assuming that there was a thought that maybe that could be something to be looked at. So although I recognize, because we've done the online parking, people are feeling that that's what it's reflective of, but that was reflective of the 2020 decision of the council to title it that way. Our internal parking group has recognized that there's other components to that. So maybe it's just a matter of retitling that. It's just a funding to allow us to manage parking issues within the county. If it is the pilot parking, council can make that decision when we bring that report forward in February. If it's not, maybe that funding is used for other parking issues that are happening within the county, that staff would bring a report forward to release that money for that project.
Then it may be my newness, and fair enough if it is, but then I'm equally, I don't really want to approve something that we don't really know what's going to do either. So I'm still going to make the motion, and if it's a bad motion, if I just don't understand, then I guess I'll be defeated. But I'm going to still move 95,000 out of either approving to go forward with the paid parking we haven't studied yet, or we're doing something that we're not sure exactly what it's for. So, anyways, I'm moving to remove the 2103201.
It's still moved, seconded by Councillor Van Passen. Any further discussion? Councillor Columbus, go ahead.
Would it be better to go through the budget amendment process after we learn more February meeting, rather than eliminate it right now? Like, if you eliminate it right now,
Positive
Yeah.
variance as opposed to keeping it and adding it back into negative. Good point. Any further questions or debate? If seeing none, my 2 cents, I would be happy to support renaming it in the budget. So I'll not be supporting the motion. I just had a conversation with Councilor Breton about simple parking issues and no clarity around our path forward. So I think it's a good investment. Parking's been an issue for quite some time. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor and opposed? Motion is defeated. It remains in the budget. Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, Councillor Van Passen, then Duffy, then Breton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Go to page 40 and 42 of this document. The placemaking assets. I think that's the carryover of the gateway signage program that we used to have, and it's $20,000 for Simcoe and $25,000 for Delhi. I'd like to see those projects deleted. If we need any money in the sign budget, we can buy some more rough road ahead signs and bridge closed signs. But again, we've done without this for years. This might not be the year to add more stuff. So I would move that both of those projects be deleted.
Sorry, by both you mean placemaking assets and page, so page 40 and then page 42, placemaking assets Delhi. So, okay. Seconded by Councillor Michelli. Councillor Duffy, is that you reaching for the microphone? Nope. Any comments, questions, concerns? Can I get a comment from staff about these initiatives? Yep.
Drew, thanks through the chair. So on these items, it is the evolution of the Gateway Signage Program, but it's evolved from that. So it is about placemaking initiatives within these communities, particularly downtowns, activating underutilized space. Think of them as beautification projects, something memorable about the location, vibrancy, tourism, economic development, social interaction, could be streetscaping, could be signage, could be intersectional work features, some kind of design intervention. The Simcoe one had some design money in it for 2022, and we're currently working with the Downtown BIA as a placemaking project that they've hired a consultant, and the study is getting close to being finished. They just had a stakeholder session. And so if there's a quick win identified by the stakeholders and the BIA, this is the contribution, I would say, from Norfolk that then we would look to BIA or others to match to install some feature. On the Delhi side, we've been working with the chamber for quite a while on some items for how we can improve the visual aspect and the placemaking of Delhi, as we are seeing that as a future growth area. And so there are some, there's no concrete plans in place, of course, for Delhi right now to utilize that money, because that would be upcoming to work with various groups on that. But that's some information about the program. So we're hopeful that it would continue, and it's something that a lot of places do. We're in this continual competition, of course, for talent and growth. So this is one of the other elements related to that.
Okay, thank you, staff. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Mayor Martin, and through you, just to comment that I won't be supporting the motion that's on the table. I think I was involved in the gateway signage for Simcoe that went up recently, and it has, in the last few years, has made a significant difference in terms of the visual aspect, driving in and out of town, and having taken part in part of the placemaking meeting with the BIA. There is some exciting plans coming together, and if we can use this specifically related to Simcoe investment to kickstart some of that, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor, certainly for people in Simcoe area.
Every one of these is a worthwhile endeavor. Staff have scrubbed this budget and re-scrubbed it, and there is a want or a need or direction from council on what we want. But we want to cut the number that we're going to charge our taxpayers. You have to fight and cut some things out. So I can argue both ways on just about everything in here, but again, these are something new. It doesn't exist now. So can we make do without it for another year when the economy in the whole world picks up? That would be my overriding question. And again, how long do we want to spend on 5,000 here, 10,000 there? If staff have done a good job, the needs are there. Otherwise, staff wouldn't have left it there. But I've got a big long list.
He's trying to teach us all a lesson here, because he opted out early and then I said, no, we'll go through the budget. So now we're going to be subjected to Councillor Van Passen's line items all day. I guess my question to staff, to Brandon, would be just that. I believe in the project. I think it is good, quick wins for council. It's an investment in Simcoe and Delhi, which are priorities for us and the downtowns. My question is, is this the year to do it? I like the idea of having a budgeted number, because if they come to us with a bigger ask, we can simply say, no, this is what we've budgeted for, this is what we have, instead of having nothing in the budget and maybe landing on a higher figure. But is this the year to do it? Are we time sensitive with the BIA chamber and so on?
Through the chair, you could always look at deferring by 1 year. To me, the timing seems to align, because the plan and the consultant and the work is happening now, so it's going to recommend something, and so you would then have the money in 2023 to work. Could we wait a year? That might be possible. The other advantage is having money in the budget, so that I really have a challenge with removing items versus deferring items, but having something in the budget gives us that additional input to going for grants. And that's what we've been pretty successful in economic development of doing, and with some of the partners, BIAs and chambers. So having that in there gives us that additional feather in the cap to try and pursue some grants.
Okay, that's a great point. That's a very...
I guess through you to Brandon, is there a beautification budget for Waterford, Dover, Cortland, Port Rowan? Is this an ongoing project, or is it focused just on the Delhi and Simcoe this year and ongoing?
Through the chair, that is a great question, and the answer is yes. It is a program, an ongoing program. So what we found is that we've gone through and done all the gateway signage for the communities, including hamlets, and now we're circling back and evolving into placemaking. So the reason Simcoe and Delhi were first is because the Simcoe plan was to be underway. And then the Delhi, this would align with the Delhi plan. So I guess we could look at maybe the Delhi $5,000 of design money, and the 20 that could be offset by 1 year to allow the Delhi plan proceeding in 2023. That might be one small little savings. And then after that, Waterford would be up, and then it goes to the next communities as the plans happen. So
All right, thanks, staff. To wrap this up, I won't support the motion, but as a compromise, if it's defeated, I would support the deferral, so it stays in the budget, so staff are able to seek out grant funding, so it could roll forward next year. So I don't support removing it, which is what the current motion is, moved by Councillor Van Passen, seconded by Councillor Michelle. Thank you. Call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? Motion's defeated. Is there an alternative? We're leaving it in the budget, or is someone prepared to move a deferral of the funds to next year so we don't spend the money this year, but it is in the budget for grant funding? Councillor Van Passen, my apologies. Are you happy to move that, or do you want to speak?
No, I'm happy to move that. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Is there a seconder for the deferral? Councillor Berry. And I'm just going to go right for it. Call the question. All those in favor deferring by 1 year? And opposed? Okay, it's carried. So it remains in the budget for next year. Thank you, everyone. Who did I have on deck for the next line item? There were quite a few hands. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, it's just a question related to the new pedestrian crossing. I'm hesitant to bring it up because I feel like Councillor Van Passen may want to cut it, but it's safety of children, so likely not. It's just a question to staff. When might that actually be completed, that project?
Certainly. So through the chair, all these projects we have in the hopper for 2023 work. So something as simple as this requires a quick review and design. This would be a summer 2023 install.
Councillor Van Passen.
Yeah, I did have that one on my list. You know, there's an intersection with lights on it on the other side of the bridge. Maybe tell the kids to cross there, not there, but it doesn't work that way for the safety of children. But could staff follow up a bit? This is the engineering portion. And what's going to be in the budget for 2024 then to actually do it?
Sorry, Councillor Van Passen, I didn't understand your question.
That this money is for design in 2023. Is that design and work, or is it just to do the design and the engineering work required, and then next year, like that's what we tend to do, is rest two-stage process?
Sorry, fully understand. No, through the chair, this is for the design and installation.
Any further questions? One question I have to staff is regarding Fort Rowan skate park. Happy to see the item stay in the budget, but I did hear complaints about lack of lighting in that area. It's a pathway to a residential area, a walking route. Just a note, I'm not looking for any answer right now or something to be added in the budget, but if when you're making investments in that skate park and doing the concrete pads, if we could do some type of review of the lighting in that area. Any further questions? Okay, great. Thank you. Not much. Got a whole day ahead of us still. We are going to finish up with the new incremental then. We've got motions prepared. So next up would be the operating budget. So why don't we take a 10-minute break here? We'll come back so that there's a delineation, and we're going to start with the operating budget, okay? It is 10:14. Let's be back here by 10:25. Okay, Teresa is going to put our motion up on the screen because we have updated figures based on some of those reductions. So I'm looking for a mover and a seconder for this motion. Finance staff, you're good with that. You guys work together on the breakup. Councillor Van Andriesch, you can hear us. We're all good. Okay, do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Michelle moves, seconded by Councillor Huffman. Any further debate or discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Councillor Breton, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know we're gonna start to go through this pile of paper here, but, the question is, could we, or, well, I like working with percentages, and I don't know where we're at now, but I like to know what 1% in the budget would represent in dollars and cents. Can we have that figure at some point here this month?
Yeah, we'll get you that figure, the overall. And then what staff are going to do today, they're working on a calculator on their computer because we know that we're going to need a figure by the end of the day or end of tomorrow, whichever we finish with. So they're going to calculate as we go and produce where we're at with the increase. So if you're ever wondering, just be sure to ask them, and then intermittently they're going to put the calculator up on the screen for us as well.
Thank you.
Love that.
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Brunton, the amount required to change the levy by 1% is $1,105,000.
Okay, we're going to move on to the proposed 2023 levy-supported operating budget that Norfolk County's team has been preparing over the last number of months. This document includes the funds that are required for the day-to-day expenses. In many ways, it's similar to a typical household budget. Things like phone bill, groceries, car insurance. Those are the operating costs. For Norfolk County, the operating budget plans the funding of regular programs and services that the county takes part in throughout the year, such as snow removal, road maintenance, fire service, libraries, and more. The operating budget is funded primarily through property taxes, fees and charges, grants, and investment incomes. This budget is a plan that not only sets the rate for 2023, but also acts as a guide for how the county will operate, setting priorities through the allocation of financial resources. This is a key step in moving the organization towards meeting the long-term strategic goals of council. So with that, we're going to move into the next section of the agenda. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to share some of my notes. So as we build out our first full budget as a new term of council, I'd like to take this opportunity to remind you all of what we heard while we were door knocking. The message was one of community members asking for a common sense approach, a no frills budget, and understanding from those who are elected and make the decisions to be reasonable and responsible with our tax dollars. I'd like to remind you of your oath of office you took and the responsibility to best represent all of the tax and ratepayers across Norfolk, not just the ones that live in your boundary lines. And I'd like to remind you about our strategic planning session that we started not long ago, where recurring themes such as financial sustainability, customer service improvements to core services, and easing the burden of provincial downloads to our community members came up time and time again. Lastly, I'd like to take this opportunity to remind you of our staff. The staff members who have worked tirelessly to provide services to our community and information to the public and this council to best suit our mandates. The same staff who've kept Norfolk County afloat during trying budgets over the last few years and changing councils. Through countless meetings, they've produced a budget for the taxpayers of Norfolk County that is under the rate of inflation and gives consideration to the corporate-wide needs, not just individual budgets and priorities of each department. We need to be bold enough to invest in our corporation even through trying times and high rates of inflation, as staff have put together asks to support them in their departments while continuing the normal course of business. Norfolk County as a community has grown over the years with new demands and more people to serve, as well as wider and bigger scope of projects and capital initiatives without the staffing resources to facilitate and accommodate the growth. It's certainly our job to challenge the norms, ask tough questions, and meet in the middle, but we also need to take action to support our community demands by way of digging into staff's business plans and new business initiatives and requests. Although every department would benefit from more staff, more resources, we must adopt the same corporate-wide lens to prioritize our wants and ensure that they are more than wants. They must be needs. And that is the exact approach that staff has taken today. So it's very interesting for me being in a new role for a new budget and how staff really put their heads together and work to identify what the corporate-wide needs are. So I really urge you to just give consideration to that when you're pushing forward with some of your community desires and preferences today. And I would like to just take the opportunity to thank staff. It's been excellent working with you, getting ready for the budget. I think you've done a great job. So with that, we're going to move along. The clerk would like that the committee give consideration to waiving the rules of procedure and allow us to provide consensus motions on each item as we move through the day. So we won't get a mover and a seconder. It's going to, by way of consensus, unless there's a major objection, assume it's adopted. And then at the end, we're going to pass, finalize that data. Staff are going to give us the numbers and we'll pass a final motion. So if everyone's in agreement with that, can I have a motion to waive the rules of procedure to allow consensus voting during the budget meeting? Moved by Councillor Duthie, seconded by Councillor Huffman. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. We are section 1 of the budget package, which provides high-level overview information of the 2023 levy-supported operating budget. The section contains staff report CS 23011, proposed 2023 levy-supported operating budget, the overview, as well as the budget packet guide. For this section, we're going to start with page 3 to 25 of our budget package. And to start off the review of the budget, I'm going to pass it over to our CAO to open us up with some opening comments and remarks, and then we will move along to staff.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, members of council, residents and staff. Every morning I wake up very excited to come to work about the challenges that we have, confident in the people that we have working here, respectful for the people we work for, and standing proud that we make positive strides day in and day out. Today, this council will make some very important decisions. Decisions that will perhaps be the most important over your 4-year term, and decisions that will set the course of the county for generations to come, decisions that will build upon past successes, and decisions that historians will look back on and assess their impact. Norfolk residents have much to be proud of. I've never lived in a community where such passion for their community is evident in everything we do. We heard a little bit of that passion this morning. We have community groups raising funds for important projects in their communities. We have volunteer groups filling service gaps everywhere. We have businesses and residents doing their part, and areas willing to protect their identity and history at all costs. Staff have worked diligently and tirelessly for months in developing this budget in an environment that is unprecedented. We have generations that have lived without having to deal with the pressures we face today. Norfolk County is not in a bubble. We're not immune from the pressures the entire world is facing. And this council is today faced with a perfect economic and financial storm. Some of the macroeconomic issues facing us today is we have specific issues that we're going to be dealing with. We've embarked on the largest and most expensive capital project in Norfolk's history. We have an aging infrastructure that is not yet fully inventoried nor quantified. We have increasing debt levels at a time when debt borrowing costs are increasing. We have collective bargaining agreements to be negotiated, options available to us to run this business. This county, we must rely on residential taxes. In theory, Property taxation pays for services that everyone uses, such as roads, ambulance, fire, garbage collection, winter maintenance, while user fees attempt to capture cost recovery in delivering some more discretionary service offerings. The only other revenue option for municipalities is grants and subsidies from the province and the federal government. Staff continue to mine for all of those funding opportunities and are regularly submitting applications and hoping for success. We have had many successes to date, and we anticipate those successes to continue into 2023. So as I turn the microphone over to staff to deliver the proposed 2023 budget, I ask Council to consider the future of Norfolk, both the short-term and long-term pressures we face, the ability to think of not only the next 4 years, but the next 40 plus years, and to
Supported operating budget presented today continues to work towards moving our financial situation to a more positive outlook. We have been working on this since 2019 and need to remain on this path to build a strong financial future. We continue to focus on the county's reserves to ensure asset management needs are met in the future. We manage debt limits over time, provide efficient services, and address growth while maintaining stabilized taxation increases annually. Attaining financial sustainability.
Chris and I are excited to be here today with you to go through our presentation on the 2023 levy supported operating budget. I just have a few opening remarks before we begin. The finance team began working on the budget that is before you over the summer of 2022. Our team works closely with all the departments and the divisions across the organization, reviewing business needs, analyzing costs and economic projections, and updating thousands of lines of accounts, which all culminate in the document that you have before you today. We have carefully considered contract increases, potential negotiations, current and projected economic factors, division priorities, and the affordability of initiatives relative to Norfolk's financial situation. This budget presents a balanced approach which have been invaluable to our team, and though we are happy for her and wish her the very best in her retirement, as we embark on her last budget deliberation, I would be lying if I told you that this was not impacting property taxes, property owners, and the county. It is important to look at the current external pressures being experienced. These pressures will affect the residents and business owners of the county and should be recognized when contemplating the taxation increase for the current year. The first area to note is that overall economic conditions, both locally and on a broader level, have been significantly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Continued interest rate hikes, supply chains, labor markets, and high levels of inflation have contributed to slower economic recovery than would have been predicted. It's important to recognize that the economy has not yet returned to pre-pandemic levels, and economists remain divided on how Canada will trend through 2023. I'm going to take a closer look at two of the factors that we've identified: supply chain issues and inflation. Supply chain issues result in difficulty procuring goods for county services, which leads to increased prices. These pressures began in 2020 and have continued through the pandemic, impacting not only the supply of goods, but also the availability of delivery drivers to complete the shipment of goods required in our operations. These impacts can especially be seen in the results of construction tenders, contracts based on fuel prices, and significant delays in receiving vehicles and equipment. Inflationary pressures, as noted, will result in these factors being felt by all the residents and businesses when purchasing goods and services. According to Statistics Canada, inflation was at 6.9% on a year-over-year basis as of October 2022. Initial impacts of these pressures have been experienced by the county. However, as purchasing contracts continue to be updated, impacts will continue to be incorporated in future budgets. Therefore, the financial pressures as a result of these economic indicators are expected to continue to drive future year tax increases. The municipal requirement and the budget pressures are discussed in great detail during the deliberations, but it's also important to consider the pressures that are being placed on residents. The slide that's before you now shows the prior year tax increases, as well as the water and wastewater rate increases experienced in Norfolk County. It is apparent when reviewing the residential impacts that following significant efforts at budget improvements that were made in 2020, increases have normalized. These considerations were kept in mind when presenting the overall budget projection. Over the short term, these impacts, along with economic factors, have been impacting residents and businesses in the county. While budget increases are not desirable, ensuring that the county can adequately cover the cost of providing services to residents, meet debt obligations, and contribute to reserves and reserve funds is essential to long-term financial sustainability. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Chris to go through our budget preparation process in a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Amy. In order to get an understanding of community desires and areas of concern, staff in financial management and planning worked closely with the communications team to launch the 2023 budget engagement campaign in September of 2022. This campaign included several opportunities for feedback from residents, which included a budget survey, an engagement webpage, virtual idea board, and targeted advertising. The survey saw less participation than in previous years, so for 2024, staff intend to further develop the engagement process and investigate new ideas, as the feedback when there's a good level of participation can be very valuable for council. Shown on the screen here are the results from one of our survey questions related to tax increases. Of the survey responses, 30% suggested to increase taxes just enough to maintain services. Another 30% said no tax increase, even if it meant a reduction to service levels. Another 28% felt that the rate should increase just enough to expand or improve services, while the final 12% suggested reducing tax services. It should be noted that these results are quite similar to the feedback we've received the last couple of years of the survey as well. So moving on to the budget preparation process, one of the guiding principles used in the development of the budget was the budget projection, which we presented to council on July 19th. This slide represents the projection presented related to the levy-supported operating budget compared to the results contained within the document here reviewed today. The first factor, and arguably the most discussed, was for the average residential property tax increase, which was projected at 9%. The proposed document presents a budget with an overall tax increase less than the current rate of inflation and below the projection at 5.7%. As noted in the opening remarks, this was not an easy task and represents a significant achievement. The next factor was inflation, being much higher than typical, and we can see throughout the document that this is a theme in essentially all divisions and departments. Another key factor was that infrastructure funding, including debt servicing costs, would be another main budget driver. And the result is that total infrastructure funding and reserve impacts proposed account for approximately 5.3 million of the overall net increase. Next, we had projected that assessment growth would offset some of the property tax increase. And some good news today is that growth is much greater than we've seen in recent years, and is expected to generate approximately $1.7 million in additional taxation. And finally, a new process for 2022, and which we continued this year, was that staff bring a report outlining business cases for new budget initiatives to be presented to council prior to the budget deliberations. And as a result, a significant review and prioritization of requests while balancing the pressures facing taxpayers. Changing legislation and the projected 9% tax increase, several MBIs with business cases are presented in the document before you today, and were also reviewed in December. The net levy impact of all of these initiatives is approximately $800,000. So with that, we come to the overall net levy requirement that's in the proposed budget before you today. We start with the 2022 net levy requirement of $110.5 million, which sees the addition of $10.4 million resulting from infrastructure funding and inflationary impacts. These are offset by some other operational changes that resulted in a reduction of $2.3 million. And the final piece of the increased levy requirement results from the proposed service level increases that I noted previously, or the FBIs, which is an additional $800,000. Some of these impacts we're going to discuss a little bit further in detail later in our presentation, but that brings us to the proposed net levy requirement of $119.4 million. Additionally, council referred several requests from the December Budget Committee and council meetings to this budget review. So these items have not been included in the proposed document that you have today, but are instead presented as discretionary items for council consideration. So looking at the discretionary items a little bit closer, these have been brought forward by both council and external organizations through the Budget Committee and council meetings in December, as I mentioned, which are identified on this slide. These items have not been included in the proposed levy requirement and will have further impacts if council wishes to move forward with approval during this budget review. Further details and supporting documentation have been included on the agenda for today to aid with council's decision making regarding these items. These include NBIs for a curator, as we heard about earlier today, an economic development officer and a bylaw officer, as well as a few requests from boards and agencies, which were made at the December budget committee. Revised impacts have been included in the business cases for the additional NBIs on your agendas today, as the original estimates that we looked at in December were from a very preliminary list. So those have changed just slightly, if you notice that. And should council wish to include any of these items, a motion would be required as we get to that applicable point in the budget review. So what does that actually mean for the residents of Norfolk County? We're now going to take a look at the impact on the median residential property, which is the most common metric we use when discussing the annual budget impact. So beside the net levy requirement, there are also a couple of other factors that have an impact on property taxes and the change from 2022 to 2023. These include assessment growth resulting from new or improved properties and changes in education tax rates, which are provided by the province. Overall, assessment growth, as I noted earlier, is estimated at 1.7 million, which is a 1.7% reduction in the median residential tax increase. As I noted when discussing the budget projection, this growth is much greater than what was anticipated, and staff are very hopeful that this trend will continue into the future for Norfolk County. For reference, the growth for the 2022 levy-supported operating budget was approximately 600,000. In addition, at this point in time, the province has not provided draft education rates for 2023, but given the continued delay in reassessment by MPAC, it is assumed that the rates will remain equal to 2022. Staff feel this is a conservative approach, and this is what was approved for residential properties in 2022 as well. And all other years in recent history prior to the delayed reassessment, residential education rates were actually reducing. As the education rates remain the same, and the value of the median residential property also remains equal to 2022 at $240,000. This results in a total 2023 tax increase that is lower than the municipal increase. So that's the difference you'll see from our 6.4% for the municipal tax levy to the actual residential impact of 5.7%. And so once all of those factors are considered, that's what brings us to 5.7%. So we've mentioned that while the proposed budget comes within the guidance set by council, it was not an easy task. So then the question becomes, how did we get here? Throughout this process, the overall target was to produce a budget below the 90% projection while still focusing on financial sustainability. During the early development, staff was becoming increasingly concerned that we would not meet the 9% tax increase target. However, a number of strategies were used to ensure that we did this level. Some of the strategies include clear communication of the increase projected to council early in the budget process. Projection factors were communicated from the senior leadership team and financial management planning to all county staff involved in the budget process. Early discussions were held by the senior leadership team to determine strategies that would help to ensure the target was met. As well, financial management planning staff completed initial adjustments and recommendations prior to department changes in order to limit some smaller immaterial changes and focused our efforts on areas of the budget that would have the greatest impact. As well, several SLT meetings took place where difficult decisions and budget adjustments were made. And finally, the new budget initiative requests were reviewed in great detail and heavily analyzed and deliberated by SLT. Ultimately, only a few of these initiatives were recommended to move forward, and they're to address some critical needs within the overall corporation. So that gives us an idea of how we got here. So now we're going to take a little bit closer look at how we achieved that. So as noted previously, the projection warned of a potential 9% tax increase, and we're obviously below that now. So there are some notable items that have changed from that time that we wanted to highlight. These include the assessment growth that I mentioned earlier, which is nearly 3 times what we saw in the previous year. As well, there were significant changes to the owner's pension plan, which had some potential impacts. And at our initial projection, we used a worst case scenario, and the senior leadership team has made some assumptions in order to try to reduce that impact. And as well noted, a very thorough review and prioritization of the NBIs occurred as well, which helped to mitigate many of the costs that we had projected. And some other smaller items were a reduction to corporate COVID-19 budget, increased user fees, and some savings that we've realized in those area. So now we can take a look at some of the major budget drivers. These major budget drivers represent the budgetary changes that are included in the proposed budget, resulting in a net levy increase of 8.9 million or 8.1%. The money going out section that you see on your screen represents drivers that are increasing the net levy requirement, and the drivers listed within the money coming in section represent drivers that are reducing the net levy requirement. The first driver, infrastructure funding and other reserve impacts, represents the additional capital infrastructure allocations included in the budget and includes reserve transfers, debt payments, as well as budget where capital projects are funded directly from the levy. The increase for 2023 is driven by additional reserve transfers required to fund the replacement and rehabilitation of capital assets. Included in the 5.3 million are an additional recommended reserve transfers of 875,000 above what was included in the capital plan. And this was to address some specific reserve pressures that were identified by staff as we reviewed the levy budget. Finance staff will continue to focus on reserves and reserve funds in future years as we work to ensure financial sustainability of the county. But the next item we have is salaries and benefits, which is totals increases of approximately 3 million. This is excluding the funded areas, and they're a result of contract merit and benefit increases, as well as impacts of staff turnover and various job evaluations. The changes where funding is received to offset the costs of salaries and benefits have been excluded, as this figure does not drive the net levy increase. As discussed earlier, inflationary pressures are significant given what has been going on in the economy as a result of the pandemic. So we have materials, supplies, and services that are key categories of inflationary changes to known contract increases and overall inflation in these areas. Some of these impacts relate to fuel costs, insurance, utilities, locate services, waste management contracts, and contracted interventions. And again, as noted earlier, the impact of the proposed service level changes is approximately $800,000, and we'll be discussing those further in the next slide. We also have other operational changes, which is just kind of the net cumulative total of just under 400,000. And then when we take a look at the money coming in, which are the items that are reducing the net levy, we have several items which have helped to mitigate some of the pressures we were feeling. So these include user fees, which were approved with a general inflationary increase of 7%, which has resulted in an additional 409,000 revenue. Winter control is evaluated on a 3-year historical average, which has resulted in savings for materials, supplies, and services of just under 300,000. And as we continue with recovery from the pandemic, the corporate COVID-19 budget has also been reduced, as many of these impacts are no longer expected to continue. Closed waste management sites are realizing savings of a little over $300,000 based on actuals. And we also see savings in the police services area as a result of OPP contract savings, which is slightly offset by reduction in some of our ride grant application. And finally, we have the removal of the placeholder, which was in the budget from previous years to mitigate potential variances from predicted savings, which were when the budget options were implemented in those previous years. So all in all, that explains the largest budgetary changes. So now we're going to take a little bit closer look at the NBIs that are proposed. So keeping these significant economic pressures and the budget guidance in mind, the senior leadership team spent a lot of time evaluating pressure points to minimize the impact on the levy while still addressing critical needs. This year, there are 5 new budget initiatives that have been recommended by the senior leadership team for consideration. These initiatives were presented to council in December with comprehensive business cases in report CS 22-196, which was the proposed budget of initiatives for 2023. They are the result of a significant amount of time and effort by staff across the organization to begin with identifying needs, which was further reviewed, analyzed, and prioritized by SLT. Significant time was spent by staff to prepare thorough business cases only for those initiatives that were identified as the greatest priorities. It should be noted that many of these initiatives were also driven by legislative requirements. So as a quick reminder, the initiatives proposed are for Build Norfolk, which addresses several development resourcing needs. This initiative is being presented as a $0 levy impact, as planned fee increases are intended to be utilized to offset the associated cost if approved. The next one is for an information and privacy coordinator in the Clerks and Bylaw Department to address service gaps. This comes with an estimated impact of $100,000. And next we have managed IT security services, which are meant to address critical cybersecurity needs and risks. This includes an FTE as well as managed service by a third party for an impact on the levy of $224,000. We also have enhanced staffing and consulting to move the asset management plan forward, which results in an impact on the levy of $106,000. And finally, we have the impact from the Haldeman Norfolk Housing Corporation Regeneration Master Plan for repair and renewal, which is an impact of $125,000. This initiative was also presented in detail to council at the December 6th budget committee. So the budget also includes service level changes that were approved by council during the year in 2022, and they have been included in the budget as council approved initiatives. So you'll see that column as we get through the department reports. So now Amy is going to take a look at the bigger picture and discuss how this translates to property taxes.
Thanks, Chris. The pie chart that is on this slide is a visual representation of the budget, and it demonstrates how the county is using each municipal dollar that we receive by service area. At first glance, it's easy to see that the largest portion of property tax dollars goes towards paying for capital infrastructure. More than a quarter of every dollar received by the county is put towards infrastructure needs. This includes payments towards reserve transfers, debt servicing payments, as well as the capital projects funded directly from the levy. Since this is such a large portion of each tax dollar contributed, it's no surprise it's also a major driver of the budget increase, as discussed by Chris. It's also important to note this allocation of funds is in line with the public budget engagement, which indicated that road and facility maintenance were the highest ranked items in terms of investment priorities. And it's also a theme continuation from the 2022 engagement, which ranked core services as the highest priority among respondents. At this time, we're nearing the end of our presentation and preparing to hand the review of the document over to council. But before we do, it's important to recognize that this budget is based on the best estimates that we have available at the time of development. As information typically improves with time, we don't have perfect information when we're preparing the budget. This results in some level of risk. So I want to bring a few of these risks to council's attention. As noted earlier in our presentation and by Al, inflationary pressures continuing into 2023. An NBI has been brought forward by staff in order to complete Norfolk's asset management plan. Though this work is critical to the financial sustainability of the county, it is likely that additional financial pressures will be uncovered as this plan develops. On the flip side, not having a plan developed will impact future grant funding and impede staff's ability to appropriately complete long-range financial plans. As Chris noted earlier, there have been changes made to the owner's plan, and that could increase costs for the county. Originally, we forecasted the absolute highest possible expense, and then through deliberations, SLT has reduced that budget. So there's a level of risk there that more staff will join that program than we anticipated. And finally, as a municipality, Norfolk is governed by upper levels of government, which occasionally leads to changes in legislation that can impact our operations in a significant manner. This was the case in 2022 with Bills 109 and 23. Staff will continue to analyze the impacts of these changes and will provide council with more information throughout the year. These changes have led to a download of services to the municipality, which could have long-term impacts. In order to reduce these risks as much as possible, a few strategies have been employed. Over the last several years, council and staff have worked hard to make improvements in budgeting practices, instituted cost control measures, and have conducted thorough reviews of each budget area. Staff also plan to continue with variance reporting to council so that risks and funding strategies can be identified during the year if issues arise. Staff have worked to identify items that pose risk to our budget as quickly as possible through regular environmental scanning and participation in municipal user groups with our peers. It should be noted that financial pressures from these factors will continue over the long term, and it may impact budgets in the future, which takes me to our last slide. So the main focus of today is the review of the 2023 budget. It's also important to step back and take a look at the financial future of the county. Decisions today will impact the financial situation of Norfolk County in the longer term and will impact future year tax projections. On the slide, projections are shown for future net levy increases, as well as levy debt and levy reserves. If more information was available relating to business plans and future strategies and more detailed projections would be possible. However, right now, these projections are completed at a high level. These projections have been built based on the approved capital plan, as well as an assumed 4% increase in expenditures. Revenue impacts were also forecasted to change at the same level, except where ministry funding has remained stagnant over the last few years or where funding reductions are already known. Though 2023's tax increase has been proposed at a lower level than inflation, this trend is not projected to continue over the next 4 years, where higher than inflationary budgets are forecasted at increases between 5 and 6%. The main driver of this impact is that inflationary costs will continue to rise, and the county is also trying to move towards a more sustainable infrastructure funding model. Continued recommendations will be made to increase reserve contributions, and at the same time, there will be additional debt servicing costs based on planned capital expenditures in order to maintain our infrastructure. During the same time period, our levy debt will double to $84.2 million, which is shown at the chart on the bottom of the slide. And this is the leading cause of the amounts that are projected to the net levy over the forecast period. It's an important note that this slide does not include the debt that will be funded from the rate-supported operating budget. It should also be noted that this graph displays the forecasted net levy increase, but the actual impact experienced by taxpayers will also depend on the education tax rates and the level of assessment rates. When looking at this projection, it will continue to move the county toward long-term financial sustainability. This is demonstrated through levy reserves projected balances, which show a greater than inflationary increase will lead to a $9.5 million increase in the reserve balances at the end of the projection period, or $48.6 million by 2027. All that being said, it is time to return our focus to 2023 and continuing to build on Norfolk's financial foundation. So with that, we want to thank you for your time and for listening to us today and hand things back over to Chairman.
Thank you very much, staff. And I think it's important to note as well that we don't have adequate resources in the asset management aspect of our corporation. So these are high-level figures, and as we go down the road of identifying the status of our assets and what's actually required, it's very possible we'll see both the depletion in more reserves and the increase in more debt because we don't have those actual numbers yet. Okay, thank you, staff, for your presentation. So 1 second, Councillor Breton. I think the best way to tackle this is that we will open it up for committee questions to staff with regards to the presentation that was just given. Any questions with regards to the new budget or initiatives or council's added discretionary items, we're going to wait and do those when we get into that applicable division so that we keep it very clean and neat. So we're looking for questions only regarding the presentation we just received, not asking about any of the new budget initiatives or council items. Councillor Breton, Councillor Huffman, and Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Lucy.
Through the chair, that's correct.
And my second question is, and it's not a rush on this, on page 219 of our binders that we're working on today, there's a
Rate of inflation.
Through the chair to Councillor Huffman, I believe when I looked last week, the most recent update was for the month of November, and that was sitting at 6.8%.
Councillor Columbus?
Yes, this is a question that I asked.
Hands quickly to receive it as information.
Sorry, through the mayor, if that could be actually a formal motion to receive the presentation.
Moved by Councillor Vanandrishi. Seconded by Councillor Michelle. All those in favor? Received as information. Perfect. Okay, we're in our binder here. We are referring to tab 1, beginning of our binder. Boards, tab 2. I would remind committee that the NBI from the library is currently included with the discretionary items. It's not part of the 2023 operating budget. This matter will be addressed during discussion related to items 4.3, so we will have an opportunity to talk about that when we get to the discretionary items. Julie, Kent, and Richard are both in attendance from Norfolk County Public Library Board. Should the committee have any questions in regards to the library budget? Stop there. Library budget. Request that we received from the library board and Julie Kent earlier in our budget is going to be discussed under discretionary items at the end of the budget. So the intent, so that council and Councillor Vanandrishi is aware, we're going to build out our base budget, our requests from staffs, and then we're going to stop and get a number to see what our percentage is at before we look at the discretionary items. So that's the purpose of doing it separately.
All right, thank you very much. Then I'll hold my questions till then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Each individual department budget. So once we are in that particular department, feel free to ask any questions about the staff endorsed NBIs. The additional, we're calling them the discretionary items. That includes the BIA, the Linwood Board, the ECDEB, the bylaw, the curator, and so on, the library position. Those are found, library? Yeah, those are found in discretionary items, which are the additional requests that have been made to council. So after we have passed our budget, we know what percentage we're at, then we're going to look at those discretionary items. They are separated out because they were requests made from the community, from council. They were not endorsed by staff. So we're going to understand what our percentage is before we adopt those additional things. So any questions concerning NBIs produced from staff will be asked in those department budgets when we get to them. And right now we're just on boards and agencies. So Duffy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate that we are into the library's section of the budget. I did ask finance staff at the break to give me an understanding of current
changes to the actual levy amount that we can put up on the screen. But so the first one being that project for the Waterford plan that was mentioned as we discussed capital earlier, moving forward to 2023. We've tracked that change as
move on. So I've declared a possible pecuniary interest with regards to the police service board budget. So let's skip that one so that I can stay consistent here. We're going to go into the remaining boards and agencies in section 2. So the Linwood Arts Center. For clarity, they provided an additional request to council that is under discretionary items.
That's pointing that out, and 50 was the deal we made with them.
And they use the similar colors in the chart, so not your fault. Any further questions regarding existing Linwood Art budget? Okay, great. We'll move along. Grand River Conservation Authority. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councilor Berry.
Just so I'm clear moving forward, so the 50,000, is that already agreed upon, or is that still up for discussion later at some point?
I believe at this point in time we've committed. Getting a nodding head from
That's done
from staff. We've made
no
that
discussion about that.
Through you, Madam Chair, I mean, council could always have a discussion over it. It's a commitment that the county made to Linwood. That is in your base budget right now, $50,000.
Thank you.
Okay. I guess we don't need to go through, so I'm going to do a final call. We've got Grand River and Long Point next. We don't need to stop at every single page here. If I don't see a set of hands with questions for staff on either one of those, then I'm going to pass the chair to Councillor Michelle, Deputy Mayor Michelle, to review the Police Service Board budget. Teresa, would you like me to do a consensus motion on the first three right now before I switch chairs?
Through the mayor, I don't think we necessarily need a consensus motion to approve each of the pieces. I think those are already in the budget. I think consensus motions will be for any anomalies that council wants to see changed in the proposed budget at this time. If they want to reduce or increase any of the budget amounts that are in there.
And so we'll just do a very separate, clean motion with Police Service Board entirely at the end.
That's just to remove your pecuniary interest of it.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to pass the chair over to the Deputy Mayor and let him take over for Police Service Board, which is pages 32 to 34.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We are on pages 32 to 34 for the police services budget. There are not going to be any presentations for this section of the budget. However,
The discussion, which is section 3 of the budget, divisional operating budget. And the section outlines operating budgets proposed for Norfolk County's operating divisions. Each divisional budget is separated by the subdividers. The budget committee's review of this section of the budget will be completed by each individual division. A plan's been provided with estimated timeframes to keep us on track, hopefully. General manager's presentations for the division is scheduled for 10 minutes or less. Time for committee questions and answers for that particular division is scheduled for 20 minutes or less. This would be the appropriate time for committee members to ask any questions about any proposed discretionary items or the NBI associated with the applicable division. Discussion and debate on the discretionary item will occur during receipt of the associated communications, which is item 5.2. So you're asking your questions now, but we're not moving motions about new budgets or on discretionary items. Staff presentation is attached to the agenda package, which is item 4.4.1, and staff presentations will focus at the divisional level, and a page-by-page review of each department has not been planned for today's deliberations. However, should a committee member have questions that relate to a particular department, it is encouraged that these questions will be raised following the divisional presentation. Prior to the presentation, I will introduce each division being discussed and will outline the pages within the budget package. So first up, we have Office of the CAO. We'll start our review with the Office of the CAO division, and it is outlined on page 73 to 98 of our budget package. 73 to 98. This section will be presented a little differently than the other divisional budgets. The Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. Menezes, has requested Teresa Olson, the County Clerk, Aaron Anderson, Director of Human Resources, Gord Stillwell, Fire Chief, and Sarah Page, Chief of Paramedics, to join him in the presentation. I will hand things over to you. Al?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and through you to Budget Committee. You can see in the presentation the various sections within the division or the departments. You've got fire, human resources, clerks, and paramedic services. On the next slide. Just an overview and summary of the department. It provides administrative leadership and direction across the organization with direct oversight of the areas I mentioned earlier. In terms of some high-level successes for 2022, we commenced the Interurban Water Project. We were successful in getting that project off the ground after many years of discussion and debate. We were successful in hiring 2 vacancies within SLT, one which was an external hire, which was a very positive improvement for the area, and the second one was an internal transfer. And, I can tell you that the county is well served with those 2 new hires. We've also started to successfully transition to a post-COVID world, which means bringing some more staff back into the office on a regular basis and recommencing a lot of the services that were paused during the pandemic. For 2023 and some of the priorities that we've identified, We're going to work on formalizing a relationship with the library and specifically identifying a memorandum of understanding and getting that identified and completed. We are going to look at a review of our provincial offenses courts and the POA and some of the services that we offer through that. We're going to be focusing on customer service, and we're going to be looking at all of our facilities corporate wide. We're certainly going to be establishing in the next month or two and finalizing the term of council priorities for the next 4 years for this council. And we're going to be actively working and pushing our Norfolk plan and implementing various strategies to improve our corporate culture and deal with our human resources plan and move things forward. And concerning our budget drivers, there were really no material changes within CAO's area. Next slide. Pass it on to Teresa, who's going to take on a couple of slides for clerks.
Thank you, Al. Through the mayor to council. So as I'm sure council is aware, the clerks and bylaw department handles items related to both bylaw enforcement and clerk related responsibilities, but we also have a lot of responsibilities that I think people don't understand. So besides our council secretariat and legislative services function, clerks and bylaw is also responsible for business and lottery licensing, vital statistics, records management, civil ceremonies, access to information and privacy, municipal elections, bylaw enforcement, and the corporate mail and courier services. We also have a responsibility for the county's encroachment agreements and corporate agreement repository. As well, we play a significant part in the parking program. In 2022, our department had many successes, and I'm very proud of what I call our small but mighty team. But I'd like to highlight some of our big ones. So as I'm sure you're all aware, conducting of the 2022 municipal and school board election and our very comprehensive council orientation program. We also completed the paid parking pilot project. We completed a records management study with a third party. We created and rolled out an agreement repository across the corporation, and our team completed an advisory committee audit. We also were successful in updating and revising a number of clerks and enforcement related bylaws. For 2023, we have addressed or identified a number of projects that we're going to work on, but some of our major ones will be to take the records management study we completed this year and move forward with an enhanced digital records management strategy and privacy program. We will be completing a comprehensive business licensing bylaw review and public consultation. We plan to complete the remaining cannabis investigations that we have on file. And of course, our goal is to continue to research, update, and complete the remaining of our clerks and enforcement bylaws that require updating. We have a few budget drivers that are carrying us into 2023. We have a couple levy-funded capital projects. We do have a request for an MBI for an additional staff member in clerks. We do have some salary and benefit changes due to some restructuring, I guess, and staff reviews, as well as our crossing guard services contract has increased in this last year.
We're going to plow through here, Councillor Breton, and stop at the end once the whole division is complete. Ms. Anderson, if you're ready.
Yep. Thanks, Teresa. Good morning, Mayor and Council. So the HR department is responsible to provide human resources functions to the corporation. This includes payroll and pension administration, salary and benefits administration, all labor and employee relations for our 6 unions and our non-union group, health, safety, and wellness for the corporation, training and development, and recruitment and retention. There have been many successes in 2022 and too many to put on one slide. However, here's a few that we'll highlight for council. We've upgraded our corporate-wide mentorship program to 12 coffees in 12 months. We've launched our psychological health and safety initiative and have been able to roll out to all non-union staff, union leaders, and champion worker groups. The next step is to summarize the discussions, take the recommendations, feedback, and ideas to the senior leadership team and develop a plan for implementation. We've resolved many outstanding labor relations issues and grievances, as well as completed bargaining with 4 of our 6 union groups. In 2023, we will be back at the bargaining table with 5 of the 6 groups, just based on the expiry dates. We've created numerous workshops that have been rolled out to staff, including an update of our supervisory training program. We just launched our 2023 corporate learning guide, which shows all of our internal training and development opportunities for the coming year. We've created, updated, and implemented numerous HR policies and procedures to reflect current trends and legislation. This will continue also in 2023. We've effectively implemented our temporary personal support worker wage enhancements to permanent compensation, as well as the temporary retention incentive for nurses within the guidelines and timeframes set out by the province. Some of our 2023 priorities and objectives are the implementation of the OMER's non-full-time expansion legislative changes. This is a significant change to our department and the corporation. We'll be reviewing and enhancing recruitment and retention strategies. We've already updated our job opportunities website, and we'll continue to work with the communications department to enhance that site. We'll review and modify current performance appraisal plans for non-union staff, including the exploration of a 360 review. We'll continue with the next steps of our psychological health and safety program and the continued focus on mental health strategies for all staff. And we'll work with the CAO and SLT on the Norfolk County People Plan and the implementation and other council strategic priorities. As noted on the slide, the main budget drivers for HR in 2023 are related to salaries and benefits and the removal of an accommodated position within the department, as well as interdepartmental recoveries and billable external recoveries. With that, I'll pass it over to Gordon Fire.
Thanks, Aaron. Good morning, Madam Mayor and Council. Just a quick overview of fire. Our summary includes public safety and emergency preparedness education. We work with that as a high priority to try and mitigate any risks that happen or could happen in the community. Fire code enforcement. These are generally misunderstood, but when we get to fire code enforcement, that's for the greater protection and reduction of fires in our buildings and in the community, which results in lower injuries and property losses in the communities. Fire protection and rescue services, those are our what we get called out to: cars, accidents, fires, medical responses, things like that. Training and development of 252 volunteer firefighters. It's a big portion of our staff to make sure that we have staffing available in each of our 11 stations, and they're all trained and prepared to perform their duties in a safe and controlled manner. Our successes, we completed our mandated complaint and request inspections. This is something that's required through FPPA. We delivered focused public education messages throughout the community. And we had compliance with Emergency Management Ontario in our areas of training and reporting, which is governed through the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act. We've hired and trained to NFPA requirements for our firefighters in 2022. We've just finished a recruiting class, which will be restarting that whole process again in 2023. Our priorities and objectives in 2023 is to enhance our community risk reduction programs through our smoke alarm and CO alarm programs. We're just coming off a year of some of the highest, or one of the highest fire deaths in the province, and there's a main focus will be drilling down into that with our communities and through our fire prevention staff to try and do what we can to keep to start reducing those numbers in our community as well as in the province. mental health support and awareness for our teams. Again, this is a main focus to us, keeping our our first responders healthy, either physically or mentally. Mental health support is something that's very predominant in our industry or in our sector. So we need to keep on top of that, and we do have supports in place. We're just trying to enhance that and making sure we do the best we can for our staff. Staff development for succession planning. This is a focus towards our leaders in the stations. We currently have a very well developed and instructional training program for our recruits that come on. We're just working towards enhancing our officer training and development to allow our leaders to work as well as they can in their stations and help support staff in the stations when it's needed. Our last priority for this slide is structure and implement mandatory NFPA certification. This was something that come into effect in July of 2022. Staff have put together a foundation of how that's going to be delivered over the next 3 to 5 years, and it's just it'll be a moving target for keeping timelines in place and keeping staff engaged in the training over the next 3 to 5 years. Our main budget drivers are contributions to our reserves for fire and equipment, as well as fire protection, water supply charges. I know that there's been discussions about that earlier prior to this, but our fire and equipment repair charges and winter maintenance and for stations and dry hydrants, which we're seeing inflationary increases associated to them. And with that, that's my presentation. I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Good morning, everyone. So just a little bit about us. So clearly we're responsible for the emergency medical response in the community, whether that's in an emergency or urgent situation, or actually providing community care with our community paramedicine program. We also assist fire and EOC with emergency management across the county. So in 2022, a couple of successes are listed there. We will tell you that our call volume was up again, and we did about 18,500 calls per service last year. And we've launched and expanded many of these programs to try and address some of those healthcare pressures, the palliative care program or the Fit to Sit program at the hospital, and expanding our community paramedics. In 2023, we have a couple new things coming forward. The Ministry of Health has changed our standards, so we know that we have some new medications and new techniques coming down to the paramedics, which are going to require some education and some medications and equipment being added to the ambulances to provide better service. And we continue, as Chief Stillwell also mentioned, to support the mental health and wellness of our staff, improving workplace culture and staff retention, and hopefully getting some leadership support and help 24/7. The main budget drivers, you can see there was not much put forth in our paramedic budget above status quo. The main increases you'll see is to reserve contributions and regular salary and benefits increase due to normal inflation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to bounce over to committee questions of committee to staff with regards to Office of the CAO. Let's keep it neat and clean, and we will start with page 78, which is Office of the CAO Administration as the department's summary. Are there any questions concerning that? Clerks and bylaw up on deck. Councillor Van Passen, then Brenton.
I would just like to make a comment that, our CAO is leading by example. I think except for a restatement of some numbers in the corporate services, his budgeting.
Is that revenue offset rate in this budget? Is that how that worked?
When we get under corporate service, there's a POA section in the budget, so we'll revisit it later. But if you want to know, go ahead.
Through the chair, I just wanted to clarify that the question relating to the parking infraction, the revenue for that will be included on page 84. So it does fall under the bylaw area. It only goes to POA if it's gets to that point in the process.
Sorry, where am I looking on that page?
Through the chair, it would be under the fees and services charge line under revenues.
Teresa, you can up in there. Through the mayor to council and specifically to Councilor Brunton.
I guess while you're flipping your page, I'll take this opportunity. Maybe what I'll do is pass it over to Teresa or Al, but I think it's important to be fairly transparent here. This was one of this position, the FOI position, was a cut of the former term of council, short-lived. This is a legislative requirement we're not meeting timelines on, so I don't think that was probably a very appropriate cut of the day, but nonetheless, here we are. So if you want to make any comments on that, Teresa, other than it's legislated, I just want to be very true.
Is that we are responding to the service level demands that we are encountering now. And it's like everything else, you know, council makes a decision, staff make decisions.
Into a deputy clerk position because they were without a position, so they thought they could combine it because of the unique skill set of the person going into that position. It was a very unique situation. It's a very niche market, understanding privacy. That person has since left our organization. So recruiting somebody that had all
Meet some of these mandates?
I can certainly let Teresa try. In many cases, I think you heard the clerk say she's spending a lot of time. It's non-billable time. When I said overtime, not only there, when we've got unionized staff working, there's, I can certainly start, Madam Mayor. This is a very unique position that we're in. I can tell you in all my years in municipal government, I'm not sure I've been in this position where staff have made recommendations and prioritized positions and had council want to give us more. And come back and let us know. Bylaw for sure is and come back and let us know. Bylaw for sure is a priority area for us. I think our current team is doing a great job. We're going to be doing some different things in 2023. And so while I appreciate council wanting to give us more resources in that area, I can tell you from our discussions and our prioritization that that would not be one of the priority staff ads that SLT would be recommending.
Thank you, Councilor Van Passen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe I didn't pay attention when this was brought forward, but I want a little clarity on the exact request. There is a difference between a full-time employee or budgeting amount for a FTE equivalent that we could maybe use some money to hire a few extra summer students when we need them rather than a full-time, full-year, 365-day officer. You know, like before the election was over, was what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about that? It's not just parking. There are issues throughout the year. So I suppose if that equivalent FTE can be broken up to do good things throughout the year, then I'm no opposition to that. But I suppose my intention was to say about parking, and
I really would like to sit down, and it's not just parking. There's some other concerns that we ran into this week. And I'd like to really sit with this, our bylaw officer, supervisor, or manager, and listen to his input and perhaps some details of what has been accomplished in the last year. And
more summer students or to be placed where it might be needed at the time. But I'm not sure that I just want to go and say, okay, let's just solve in some of these things that don't get resolved in one call, but take 5, 6, 7, 10, several calls. Those lead to other things not being enforced. So we're creating this backlog of complaints and frustrated citizens and phone calls to us and phone calls to staff. And so if we can find.
Just wondered, can we get a handle on the latest response times that we have to meet under the Ontario government? Sarah?
Through the Mayor to Council, yes, that report goes in the end of March, but I can have it to you within the next week. I will send it around to Council.
Thank you.
Counselor Brunton.
You, Madam Mayor, my question kind of relates both to fire and paramedics, and maybe I'm all wrong on this, but in infrastructure funding, I guess the way I read both these documents, we want to increase the reserves for equipment and vehicle replacement. Am I correct on that? And I'm just wondering, A, what is the current balances in both those accounts for fire and paramedics? And B, the amount
Need replacing. And if it isn't done through reserves, then it's done through the levy. So part of the additional contribution to those reserves is to try to insulate the taxpayer going forward so that when those vehicles reach their end of life, the funding to replace those vehicles should come from reserves and not through the tax base. So once the increase goes into those reserves, once we've got adequate funding based on our forecasted number of vehicles we're going to have and their asset life expectancy, when those vehicles are due for replacement, the funding comes out of the reserve and not an impact on the tax base that year. And that's the strategy behind that. So while council may wish to delay that contribution, really we can't defer necessarily those older vehicles from being replaced. They'll have more maintenance, more costs associated with that. Might have some insurance impacts as well. And so our recommendation is to continue on with those contribution reserves so that when those vehicles are needed to be replaced, it comes out of those specific reserves.
So 2023 EMS vehicle and equipment reserve, 23,133. 2024, 388,507. Farm vehicle, $431,210 in 2023 with a deficit of $1,226,790. Also been passing. Or do you want to make a comment on the balance?
Well, yeah, I'm not going to argue with that's what the reserves are, but I know the use public works. I know how they calculate or used to calculate their reserve funds very quick. I'm wondering. This just seems to me that it's we don't have money. Let's throw some in there, and there should be a system in place where it's contributed based on usage every year. And I think my public works or Mr. Gridlin could expand on that, but there used to be a very specific formula on how those contributions were made and the reserve funds and stuff. Well, anyways, I just also sees fit not to change it, fine, but seems like an off jump all at one time.
Sure. Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, if I may just respond. So there is, it isn't just sort of ad hoc contributions. It's based on a specific formula, based on the number of vehicles we have, based on how many years we've had them for, when they're scheduled to be replaced, and we are contributing to those reserves because they're insufficiently funded right now. And that's why we're trying to get to a point where we don't have any of those reserve balances in the red. So it isn't an ad hoc contribution.
Okay, passing.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It's not a complicated thing. It is a calculation, but I think recently, just about every tender that went out for equipment like that, we had to make adjustments to because they're all coming in to start with and gain some ground because we know the price increases are coming. So
The CAO. Councilor Van Passen.
a question on what they have built into the budget. It is county policy that councilors' salaries and increase the equivalent of the non-union staff if there is an increase beyond it.
Instead of just willy-nilly just saying that we're going to do something without any figures in front of us.
Through the chair to Councillor Huffman, that amount for salaries and benefits for council is $15,800.
Could you repeat that, please?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Huffman, that amount
Year for the mayor's salary and the increase attributed to each the position. So sorry, mayor, deputy mayor, and council member. Actually, it will be difficult to do deputy mayor because it's a 6-month. So let's do council members increase in wage and mayor increase in wage, with the, whatever the increase is accounted for, what that dollar value is, please. Take your time, staff.
Through the chair to council, can I take a few minutes to break out the mayor and councilors separately?
Yes. Yep. Go ahead and do that. So, as in a few minutes, like I can increase as if we made an increase to the wages. If you are increase as if we made an increase to the wages. If you are not interested in adding it to the levy this year because you're interested in creating savings and everybody has something to give up and lose and we want to be in step with our community through inflation and COVID and so on. My concern is that we're not keeping a competitive wage for the council position for the individuals that take your seat when you're no longer here. And we have this discussion on a staff level all the time. I constantly am speaking to staff about other members of council and their other priorities, and do they have other employment or need other employment, but we want, capable, innovative, creative, community-oriented, motivated individuals to sit around this table. And sometimes that means younger individuals that we're trying to encourage to participate in some level. And if it doesn't pay well, they're not going to come to the table. And so we have this discrepancy where we have individuals who treat the position like a part-time job. And everyone around this table can attest that it is not. It can be a full-time job and then some if you want to apply those hours and that level of dedication. So all of that to say, if it is the will of council to forego an increase this year, I will support that only if staff are adding the budgetary increases that account for what would have been this year's as well as next year, so that we're not putting our community behind the 8 ball with what the wages will be when this term of council is finished. I want the next term of council to come in and have a competitive wage that is in line with other municipalities, or at least with what we can offer them. And outside of that, to be honest, I feel uncomfortable voting on this one because my wage is so much different than all of you, and I know how hard you all work to earn that wage. So with that blabbering said, I'll pass it back over to finance to give us some figures.
Thank you, Mayor Martin, through your council. The salary and benefit increase for the mayor is $3,400, and for the councilors, it's approximately $1,500 each. For salary only, those numbers are a little bit different.
Okay, so you would see it would be less because of the benefits. Yeah. Okay, so less than $1,500 per person is what the increase that's being suggested to be removed. I'm suggesting that should we meet around this table next year for budget and there isn't a motion to cap our wages, that the salary and benefits from this year that we're waiving be applied as well as next year's. And I don't care if this council collects on it or not, or punts that down the road again, but I want the wage to be competitive and in line. I don't want to fall 5 years behind on wage increases for the next term of council that is interested in this job. So with that, I'll open it up to any debate. The motion is moved by Councillor Van Passen, seconded by Councillor Berry to forego the increase this year. Teresa.
So just to confirm right now, as you said, that's the motion on the floor. The motion does not include the increase for future budget considerations. So if that's a friendly amendment or if that's not, I'd like to understand that.
Councillor Van Passen.
Mayor, if you include it in the budget, but don't pay it out, it doesn't change the levy, like change it.
Next year.
You would have to include twice as much in the budget next year.
Next year.
Okay.
That's my condition. Is there any debate on what the motion is, and are you open to that friendly amendment or no?
Well, I don't know if that's a friendly amendment or it changes it, because then you're locking something in. You know, I think we have to rethink the policy itself. And I know I've chatted with staff over the years, you know, I think that, you get elected, you should get the same salary for the full 4-year term, but build all those increases in so it automatically increases for the next term when they start. So you know you're locked in at your price, but if staff get a 1% increase, then that adds to it. The next year you get another 1%. Now it's 2% more. If you got 2%, that's 4% more. But yeah, total it all up and make the jump at the beginning of each term. But that would take a change in policy and a discussion for this day. So
And if you're just adding the 1% each and every
whatever they are
term,
getting, you know, like.
are you suggesting that it would be the annual increase would be calculated and added at the end of every term? Or are you suggesting that the annual increase be applied?
Four annual increases
okay.
would be added up.
Yep,
total,
so same as what I'm saying. If we're not
saying that you start the new term, but once you start that term, you make that money all for 4 years.
right. However, we're saying that we're debating just this year's
Debating
wage.
just today about not increasing it, and I'm not willing to put extra conditions on it. Let's be simple, straightforward. It makes it so we have to lock in next year's budget, already doubling that. That's going to be discussion for next year. So I will deal with the motion as I
Okay, so friendly amendment is not accepted. The motion is to not increase council and mayor and council's wages for this year.
Yeah.
And it leaves it open to negotiate and next year. So we're entering into debate. We know what the motion is. Councillor Huffman, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Martin. I was just waiting for one of my colleagues to bring up this wonderful suggestion. I do need to make note, and it seems to be that I've done this before and I get skewered for it in the media, but there is discrepancy around the table in many different ways. For a fact, I don't do this as my part-time retirement job. I do this as my full-time employment. They would suggest to the individuals who feel strongly that they can do without that increase, that they donate their funds back to Norfolk County, and we go forward with the proposed option of the increases that was already built into the budget.
Councillor Bear.
Not in favor of an increase. I agree with Councillor Van Passen that if we are locked in at our rate, that should be our rate. And if this isn't the job for us, then that's not the job for us. But I'm not in favor of an increase.
Councillor Van Andriesch.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been on several boards and a long time, and lots of us have given up salaries for a year. I'm in favor of this one for this year and to relook at it next year. I think if you're running in a term, and if you sacrifice that the first year of your term, and you're here to serve the people, and I enjoy the job that I'm doing, and I'm prepared to say that if this year we leave it at status quo, what we're getting, I think I'm fine with that. Just wanted to make that mention.
Wait.
Yes, everybody has a say, and we're talking about $15,000 total, I think, here, are we not? It isn't going to make much of a dent, but I tend to agree with Councillor Van Passen and Adam that
this isn't, as I used the term before, just a cute little part-time job to fill your time because you need something to do. So I would support the budget motion if it was included that we made sure that we were back on track looking at the future for future council members, because it always puts you in that position where you don't want to be the ones who put in a raise for yourself and then the next council comes in and there needs to be something put in place. I do almost like that.
But a procedural question. There's a motion on the floor, moved and seconded. We've had a couple of people wanting to do friendly amendments, so one of them moved that's an amendment to the motion that's on the floor, and the other one seconded it. We could see if the amendment goes in, and then we can deal with the motion.
So moved. Councillor Huffman moves an amendment to the motion asking for the wage increase to not carry over this year, or sorry, to not occur this year, but staff to make plans for next year to include 2 years worth of wage increases, and we'll debate it at that year's budget. So that's moved as an amendment. I need a seconder. That year's budget. So that's moved as an amendment. I need a seconder. Councillor Duffy. And to avoid any longer discussion on this, I'm just going to call the question in support of the amendment. All those in favor? And opposed? Aye. Who did I miss? Oh, Counselor Van Andrucci, how did you vote? Okay, so that's carried. So the amendment can proceed. Counselor Duffy, you want to speak to it? Then Columbus, you spoke, and then Counselor Berry. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you on the, I'm speaking on the original motion then? That's what we're back to? Okay, just to confirm. With the amendment made. Okay, so I can support that motion then. My comment would simply be this to my colleagues. It is, as it has been referenced, it is a job, and it is an important job. This corporation is worth 204
Municipalities, our neighboring municipalities, Sullivan Brand, are paying their council.
Believe Haldeman's at 70,000+ for the job you're currently doing for 40 as a comparative.
Do we know what brand Oxford and Elgin are paying?
Counselor Michelle, chime in.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know the exact figures, but I am aware that Norfolk County is on the very low end of that scale.
And I think that's reflective in our challenges in the budget. I'm not suggesting that we need to be at $75,000, but it's worth considering. Counselor Berry for the second time, and then Counselor Van Andrucci for the second time.
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor. I guess through
Missing is that the council before sat and did it already in steps. So some people are feeling like that message has been demonstrated, but I don't disagree with your point. Counselor Van Andrucci, go ahead, and then we have the motion on the screen, and I'm going to call the question.
Yes, my point to be made was the fact that we are on a 4-year term, and in past history of different organizations I worked with, it was acknowledged that to the public that we did not take an increase in one of those years. And that is why I'm in favor of this for this year and a review at next budget. I'm not doing this just to sacrifice my lifestyle at all, but I'm doing this to serve the people, and I can acknowledge that it costs a lot of dollars to come and serve the people. So we have to be acknowledged and be compensated fairly. So that's my point. I'm okay with this year and to review next year. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. And just to put this into perspective, this is 0.014% of our overall budget. So we probably spent more time discussing it than we're saving money for what it's worth. So future note to all. The motion is on the screen so that we are very, very clear. The amendment has carried. And that the proposed increase be included in future budget consideration. Okay, perfect. So everyone understands what we're voting on? Moved by Counselor Van Passen, seconded by Counselor Berry. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. And does someone want to provide some direction to staff to provide competitive wages information prior to next term, next budget? Or sooner, or?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that's an important point. So I would like to find a way to provide direction to staff that they bring back a report relating to compensation of neighboring municipalities for council and mayor positions in advance of the next budget.
Sure. Councilor Van Passen.
Would you like to include the overall policy where it's set, that you can review the whole thing at once?
Sure. Before next year. A full year to do that. Okay, is there a seconder for that? Counselor Huffman, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, I believe we have lunch here, so why don't we take a break for staff? What would you like to see? 30 minutes? Is it we're behind schedule, but they're 12. So let's be back here at 1 o'clock sharp. I'm starting at 1, and we're going to go into community development.
10 seconds.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We are going to pick up. Okay, staff's here. We're going to pick up with presentations. We're under community development, and I'm going to pass it over to staff to take us through the brief presentation followed by questions, and we're sticking to our timetable. Councillor Vanendry, can you hear us okay? Nodding yes, okay. So we're going to do community development. Mr. Sloan, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you and good afternoon. So the Community Development Division provides valued services to our community and our stakeholders. Moving to the next slide. In 2022, we launched the first ever Norfolk Community Day, which we believe was pretty successful. I think our estimates were about 4,500 to 5,000 people were out participating and involved in this event, and hopefully it'll grow into the future. We still had fairly high development numbers in terms of development applications and building permits last year. We went a little bit more digital in 2022 with our online building permits. We're set up for the online development applications to roll out. We have online historical archives. We have a self-serve system for the encore booking of requests for recreation programs and facility, hall bookings, etc. We also had the second year of the Economic Recovery Implementation Plan, which had a number of actions, and we'll provide an update report to conclude that to council in the coming months. A number of grants were provided, support for other businesses and others with grants. Our Entrepreneurship Center launching and some successes there. Moving on to the next slide, when we're looking forward, we are moving forward with our growth management study and direction about our official plan for future growth, settlement areas, industrial land to comply with provincial policy direction. As council is well aware, there's a lot of new provincial policy and legislative direction about development applications that we're going to be dealing with in 2023. We're looking at updating our building bylaw, rolling out an evolved community development awards program this year that's going to be combined with the community days, which will be multiple days in our Amplify Norfolk events. And we're also intending to begin some new strategies. So with this term of council, the economic development strategy is on the horizon, along with recreation facility strategy. So with the next final slide, in the past years, 2019 to 2021, I think I've calculated up that we had about a $700,000 reduction in total over those years. So we've been able to streamline things, trim things. There's been a number of hard decisions in the past couple of years that have impacted many of these departments and functional areas. We have been good stewards of some positive variance, but now again, this year we're faced with a number of corporate-wide drivers that you've already heard about. There's some specific drivers for our division. So some of those include the capital program. So our rec facility strategy, the ECDEV strategy, and the planning studies, all those combined are embedded within the departmental budgets as one of the drivers. Council approved initiatives. We have, my understanding, taking with finance a somewhat conservative estimate for program revenues in 2023. And that would be for recreation, heritage culture, building, and planning. Some of it's due to the lower numbers with COVID, but as we are expecting to rebound, they're starting to tick up, and we're seeing that late in the year. We're seeing some numbers rebounding and going up. What is the outlook for 2023? Are we going to be at pre-COVID levels for where we're going? I think the approach so far through finance is to be a little bit conservative on that. So there's a number of items embedded within the departmental budgets. Really, the combination of everything has a fair impact, given our relatively modest budget that we have for this functional area. But we are here for any questions or as we go through the pages. Thank you.
Okie dokie, thank you. So we're opening it up for questions of the Community Development Division, Planning, Heritage and Culture, Building, ECDEV, and Recreation. We have questions pertaining to the NBIs, which include Build Norfolk, and then the discretionary item is the Economic Development Officer and the Curator. So all of those questions are applicable. Fire away. Councilor Duffy.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question then, just to confirm, the NBI, the Build Norfolk NBI is already baked into what we're seeing here. Am I correct?
Correct. And we can have a discussion once we make it through these about amending, removing, changing NBIs. I just am trying to keep it streamlined to questions right now. Councilor Hoffman.
Thank you, Chair Martin. Through you, just to clarify with staff and kind of piggybacking on Councillor Duffy's comment regarding the MBIs. The Build Norfolk MBI is zero levy impact. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Very much for that clarification.
Okay, I'd like to throw out a couple questions about those discretionary items. So to whomever on staff would like to take this, again, can I get some comments on the Curator and ECDEV Officer? Obviously, we know that they would provide a valued service to our community, but again, my message is, would this be a priority? Or it wasn't a priority that made the NBI list. So can we have staff speak to that so that, you know, we're making sure if we're adding these additional staff members and increases in service levels, it's got to be really transparent and it doesn't have a business case attached for me.
Sure, thanks through the chair to committee. So I guess I would preface it overall with there, of course, are a number of competing priorities and our financial challenges that we have. So at the end of the day, the Curator MBI and the Economic Development Officer MBI were not the final staff recommended NBI. So I'll preface it with that. There's
discretionary items, please. So there's
discretionary items.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. When I guess considering these specific ones in terms of maybe some pertinent information for committee to be aware of for each museum. So if we don't have that, there is a risk, and this was identified in past budgets for council to be aware of, that could get pulled. And
that information to our attention, not staff. So it's good to, you know, regardless of what happens, to have all the information before we make a decision. So good to know. My question would be, would it be out of the realm of possibility to have Delhi receive another day open in the community to defer the curator position once we get to it in the budget? And I'm telling this now in case there's some research you want to do and come back to us, and have